got music playing still. Hey, welcome in everyone. I don't know if anyone else can hear the music. Well, welcome in everyone. Can you hear the music, Tamara?
I can't.
Oh, there it stopped. I apologize, guys. I had music still playing in my ear.
That was a beautiful intro.
Oh, I'm getting feedback from something here. I apologize, guys. We'll get this resolved. Tamara, I am getting feedback from your. One second here, guys. I apologize for the brief delay, and we will hop in.
No worries. I have a backup plan. So do you want me to switch out my mic?
Yeah, switch out the mic and go to the headphone.
Okay. Outstanding.
Okay, awesome. I think we are good to go now. Sorry, everyone. Welcome in. My name is Mark Reel, and it is Thursday, February 10th, 2022, and you are watching State of the Family Courts. Tonight, we have a very special guest. We have a fellow California attorney. I'm actually coming to you live from Indiana. I'm home for a wedding this weekend, but about 50 miles west of where I would normally be, we have California family law attorney Tamara Benefield Falk.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great. So thank you so much, Tamara, for joining us. I know we met probably about 6 weeks ago through a program we are both involved in and have been able to have a handful of really good discussions. So I am excited to have you on the show. For all our viewers, we're going to be talking a little bit of domestic violence, some trial prep, some more technical stuff if you kind of are in the weeds with your case. So
thank you so much, Mark, for having me. I really appreciate you for this.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm excited to have you. So we'll start out as something new our viewers over the last month we have done is we have our rapid fire round, a little get to know you. So I'll start out. We're going to do 5 questions about general life, and then we'll get into where they can get a hold of you. So first question is, what is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is The Matrix.
And The Matrix. Okay.
Yeah.
Why The Matrix?
So I love all the fight scenes. I love all the nuances and how they choreograph and make it very artistic. And I just love the idea of like getting unplugged and getting free, from the Matrix.
Okay. So next one is you got 1 week. You don't have any client work to deal with. Where's your vacation spot?
Turks and Caicos. I know the exact slither of sand and exactly what those waves look like. And on a great day, you can even see, the fish swimming by gently by your feet because the water is absolutely crystal clear and translucent.
Okay. See, that's more along the lines. Last week, my guest, he's from Kansas, and he threw out a spot in Canada. And I was like, I don't know if I can get behind that. I need a beach somewhere.
Absolutely.
Next one is, so where are you from originally?
So I'm a native to California, born and raised, went to school all the way through college and law school. And my practice is located in Beverly Hills. And yes, so born and raised, native California girl.
Okay. I feel like the areas I've lived in, I lived in Glendale for a while. Now
nice.
Where I'm at in Corona, they are not a whole lot of native Californians.
Yeah, you know what, Mark? It's so funny you mentioned Glendale because that's my old stomping ground. The neighborhood I grew up in is Los Feliz, which is right close by, and I always used to hang out in Glen Feliz. So. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So you mentioned your practice. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So you have your own practice in West LA. What is the website? Where can they find you?
So I'm in Beverly Hills, and I can be found conveniently at www.beverlyhillsfamilylawattorney.com.
Awesome. And then, are you exclusively in LA, or do you represent outside of LA County?
So I do the 7 counties, greater counties in Southern California. So absolutely LA County. I go as far as up north to Santa Barbara, Inland Empire. I take cases all over. And now with virtual appearances and that we're capable of, it's even broadened my horizons a little more. So if you're in California, we can help.
You got 2 here tonight for the
Yeah,
Californians. We're
that's
going
the
to talk
way.
about some non-California. We're going to talk about non-California topics that are going to apply to everyone. But you do
Right.
have 2 California attorneys on tonight.
Yeah.
So last one there is, you have it in your name tag there. Your social handle. What sites can they find you on social media?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram. My business page can be found at Tamara Benefield, just like you see it on the screen, at Tamara Benefield ESQ, through Instagram. Facebook is Benefield and Falk LLP. And right now, if you Google my name, you'll see a bunch of different other ways you can see me.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Viewers, go give her a follow. I know she's going to be pumping out a lot of really good content in the very, very near future. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump right into some topics tonight. And despite the fact that I'm on here every single week, one of the things I guess you could say, neglect is kind of what the experience and what the beginnings of an experience in California family courts are. So here's my question to you. So individual, most of our viewers are going to be fathers here. So I'll say, father walks into your office and he's unmarried, has a young child. What are the first things you tell him, and what are his experiences like in the beginning stages of going through California family courts?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, Mark. So I think that through the perspective of a father with a young child, the first thing you experience is just the magnitude of your own situation and how difficult it is to identify how to navigate the court process. And I think for most people, they kind of stumble around and they're looking at an upcoming hearing date. And you've gotten that far. Maybe you've managed to work with a paralegal and download some forms on your own. But it gets to a point for most of the fathers coming into my office where they realize what's at stake. And what's at stake is at least the temporary orders going forward to either establish legal and physical custody, to establish visitation, to establish the right to be a parent. And I think that there's a fear factor. I feel like my clients come in like just so worried and overburdened and fearing that their relationship with their child is at stake. And I get that. I completely get that as a mom. I get that as a former single parent. Just the horror of trying to find your way in terms of identifying what do you do. So I think if the fathers actually come into my office, that's a great starting point. I don't think you navigate these courts without an attorney. We can talk a little bit later about with you, Mark, about ways to do that successfully. But I think that what I share with them is my own experience. So I was once that person who needed representation and realized that the procedural complexity was just above my ability at the time. You know, the vastness of the family court. I mean, in California, you're dealing with literally, if not the largest, one of the top 3 largest courts in the entire United States of America, on the basis of, state funding and how many people are just being serviced and processed through the courts. And you just realize, you know what, I don't want to be lost in this process. I need somebody who cares. I need somebody who knows the name of my child when I call, who knows the name of my child in court. And I want someone who knows what they're doing and cares about my life and the future of my relationship with my child. So that's what I talk about with them.
Yeah, you made a point that made me chuckle because I had an individual who I just spoke with today, and I actually met him in court, and he was represented at the time in court. And his complaint was his attorney showed up and didn't know his name or called him by the wrong name. So it can be a very big and a very important decision. I think you made a really good point in talking about a lot of dads come in scared, and I think a lot of our viewers, it's that they're a good chance they've been involved in the system. May have been chewed up and spit back out. But if you're a dad here watching and you're concerned, and the big one I see is moms make threats of I'm going to you're not going to see the child. You're going to have to pay me all your money. You're going to have to do all these things. And the first thing I tell clients is that's not the case. I mean, I'm not going to. I've been practicing for a relative short period of time compared to a lot of my peers. But you talk to someone who's been around, and I don't know if you're familiar with David Pissar. I've had him on before. He's out in your neck of the woods, and now compared to 20 years ago, as crazy as it sounds, is very dad friendly. Courts are looking for a way. I mean, they're looking for a way to foster a relationship with both parents. That
Mark,
I mean, what's been your experience around that? You have a little bit more experience in family court than I do. Have you seen a shift and change in that front?
absolutely. So let me pick up on a couple of your points, Mark, because they're great. Having a great relationship with an attorney is so important. And so if someone's dropping the ball in the name of your child in court, that's a huge red flag. One of the things I like is when clients bring in photos. It's not only a source of evidence for the case that they've met the child and have spent time and held the child out as their own, but also humanizes what could otherwise be a file, right? I try not to take on too many cases where, I can't learn about who my client actually is as a person and his connection to the child. And it just really helps when you have that picture, with the father and child together, because, I think that's what it's all about. Let me zoom out a bit to answer your question, Mark. Absolutely. I think courts are attuned to just how difficult it is, especially for pro-pers to represent themselves. So if they come in with an attorney, it lets the court know, look, I know this is really serious. I don't want to drop any balls. I want someone who speaks your language, Judge. And I think that the courts are extremely sensitized to how important it is to establish the father-child relationship early on. Because one of the dynamics you get to experience, and I'm a 20+ year practitioner, is the loss of the parent-child relationship. And that can happen not because he doesn't care, not because he isn't fully committed and invested in the child's life, but because he has been literally isolated, alienated, cut off, and somehow through not having representation, fell through the cracks of the system. And that can happen. And so I think courts are very sensitive to even people who are troubled and may have had some initial issues in establishing the relationship. When they come back and they say, hey, you know what, I'm no longer working out of state, or, I struggled with addiction perhaps, but here are the things I'm doing to get help. And if you just give me an entryway, I'll establish trust with the child. I'll rebuild my co-parenting relationship with the other parent. And I'll show the court that the whole public policy of the law, which is to assure that a child has frequent and continuing contacts with both of their parents, can be realized through me. Because it is the most tragic outcome for whatever reason when you have a child without either parent, unless there are some really compelling reasons and that parent is a threat to the child's mental, emotional, physical safety. But absent some extraordinary circumstances, our entire court system is really centered around the policy of ensuring frequent and continuing contacts. And that bond is solidified through so many laws. But the bottom line is, I think it breaks the hearts of practitioners and breaks the heart of judges as well when fathers check out, right? And you see that dynamic, where it's like there's just been so many barriers to accessing their child. So many times mom didn't show up, so many court hearings asking, begging for visitation, and they fall through the cracks and they check out. So it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So please, fathers, don't ever give up on your relationship with the child. There is a way, and your presence in that child's life can mean a world full of difference for their life trajectory and their outcomes. And professionals in the business, we know that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I notice, and I think there may be some it may be some a generational thing with attorneys. I would say that outside of the guy who's been practicing law for 40 years that probably hasn't cracked the family code open in 35. What happens when attorneys conversate is a lot of times productive. In terms of, I don't know many attorneys who are going to go in with a straight face and say, hey, there should be zero contact. It happens far too frequently, but it's I hate to say it, but I'll say it. Some of our peers, I think, they'll sell any bill of goods to any human to get them to sign on the dotted line and pay them money. Um, and so I think the biggest question I always tell people, I tell clients who come through me, they're like, how many cases have you litigated? How many times have you went to trial? And I was like, you should really be looking for someone who is a very, very good negotiator, because 90% of these cases are going to end well before a final trial.
Absolutely. And we know that statistically is true. And I think having an attorney is where negotiations begin, because if you find yourself as a pro per trying to pick up and negotiate with an attorney, that would be the equivalent of a patient who needs a triple bypass trying to call a specialist who works for the person trying to prevent the triple bypass and asking them for medical advice and trying to figure out why their own triple bypass surgery isn't going well. In other words, you need someone who understands the law, who gives you a buffer, because you also don't want to say the wrong things to the wrong person, because that could get documented and make it its way into court. And you just have to be very, very careful as you navigate. And one of the fundamental things you do by educating your client on the law, by upholding the law, is by teaching them how to honor the law. So sometimes it is about helping them navigate things like talking parents or our family wizard, cueing them into why it is so important to communicate with the other co-parent. And as you know, we've seen it so many times where people just kind of justify trying to isolate the other parent because they have so much hatred and resentment build up. And it's so easy to detect when we're in court, from the eyes of the attorney and the judge. And so you never want to go in raw like that, just who you are, thinking the truth is going to set you free. Oh, no. You need a representative to protect you, to help teach you what to do, what not to do, and never interrupt your attorney in court. Make sure if your attorney is doing all the speaking for you, you've got a great attorney. You do. I'll say that.
I'll pull this one up because we got a comment here that's super relevant to what you said. And so, Shem here, I have been in court by myself thinking truth and documentation would show what has been happening. So comment in terms of what your dialogue you just had. If a dad is representing themselves, what can they do? What are kind of some of the best tips you can give? And then parlaying that into, if you have representation, what this type of information can do.
Right. So, if you're representing yourself, then what you can do is take a little time in the self-help center talking to the attorneys that are hired by the courts to help you. So the question doesn't become what's the truth, right? Because truth actually is very subjective, right? We see the truth through the eyes of the beholder, right? But the reality is that there's only one truth in family court, and that is one person, one judge who knows the law back and forth, right? Who's looking for your half truths, your mistruths, your hyperboles, your exaggerations, right? Because once you lose credibility, even inadvertently, because you thought you were telling the truth and the mom shows the counterpoints, what you're doing is you're losing credibility, right? And because you're pro per and representing yourself and thinking the truth shall set you free, you're talking way too much. You're trying to show way too much, and it's probably not in the right words, because words matter in court to establish certain like causes of action, certain statutes we're using to determine the best interests of the child. So, take a step back, right? And realize if you're doing this yourself, you're in danger. Okay. If there's no other capability, and we'll talk about other options because this can't be true, but if there's no other possibility, right, for you to represent yourself, what you need to do is laser focus, meaning you've got to compartmentalize your interests and focus on the best interests of the child, not how you feel, right? But through the perspective of how do we ensure that this child has the best life outcome. So, because that's what the judge is focusing on. Who has health insurance? Who takes the child to school, right? Who's getting therapy when the child shows distress over the prolonged parental conflict? Who's getting the IEPs done and communicating with the teachers? Meaning laser focused on the best interests of the child. And that might mean you do something that's contrary to everything you feel. Because one of the big things that people miss when they're in court representing themselves is that the purpose of telling your story in court is not to punish the other parent. It's not a reward punishment system. A lot of people do a lot of things wrong as a parent, and they're forgiven, and you see things move right on by. So maybe you have to consider, what should I do to change the outcome here? And maybe that involves me getting some parenting classes, me getting some therapy because I don't like the way this person did me wrong in the relationship. Maybe I need to focus on my own self-help, how to forgive, so that I can rebuild proper, civil, respectful, child-focused communication with the other parent. That's the perspective that a judge is having. Who's dysfunctioning? Who's centered on the child? And what's the truth about how this child is feeling and thinking and experiencing life with these two people?
Yeah, that's a lot of gold right there, for all of our viewers there. So now we'll kind of move on. Tamara and I, we picked out a couple of topics that we want to discuss, and like I said, we're both in California, but this is kind of going to be in general, and these are some of the biggest issues we see men face. So the first question, the first topic we'll move into is domestic violence. So I always give the disclaimer that any domestic violence is too much domestic violence, and both men and women should not be, whether it be any form of domestic violence, not just the physical, it shouldn't be occurring. But what we find is a lot of times you get in the heat of a divorce or a child custody matter, and all of a sudden, despite the fact 11-year relationship with no problems on the outside, one of the parties alleges the other person was seriously physically violent, substance abuse. So when a client comes to you and says, and comes in, hey, they have a temporary restraining order out on them, and they're like, I didn't do any of this, there's no evidence of this. What are the steps you take to protect them moving forward in that proceeding?
Okay, so first thing about the educational piece with the client, and I want to send out a public service announcement right now. The law has evolved to a point where domestic violence can be repetitive phone calls. Domestic violence can be coercive control, isolating someone from the family bank accounts, cutting off credit cards so that they can't leave, finding out where the woman's shelter is and showing up. Coercive control, okay? It can be emotional and psychological. A lot of things are happening just in human behavior right now. So, in the last 2 years in the pandemic, we've seen a deterioration in a lot of relationships, right? Kids aren't going to school, teachers aren't reporting um, issues of abuse to DCFS. Um, parents, married parents are fighting, right? Unmarried parents are fighting. People are under an enormous amount of stress because of these large factors in society, right? Losing your job, facing an eviction, um, dealing with sickness, not having health insurance, or maybe dealing with any combination of those factors with health insurance and with a job. But the point is, Mark, we're seeing a breakdown, right? And relationships. And there has been a sharp increase in domestic violence. Ask any 911 operator, right? Ask people in the emergency room. You're also seeing murders and homicides go up. So you're seeing that, from the extreme aspects where just people already prone to violence, just, ramping up. But you're also seeing a unique category of conflict, and that is people who would otherwise be getting along, going to school, going to work, coming back home, functioning in their relationships, who are not prone to violence, not violent people, have no propensity, no background for violence, and they're getting accused of domestic violence. And those temporary restraining orders, listen, courts are extremely sensitive to the fact that they're being misused to circumvent a regularly noticed custody action, right? But on the other hand, you have to be aware of the kinds of behavior that can trip you up. So one of the first things you have to do when you as a person are in the court system is you've got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. And what that might mean is, what am I saying on social media and how could that be perceived by the other parent? I won a whole case just on social media postings, and they were basically veiled threats to the other parent. Okay. What am I saying in my text messages to this parent? How often am I calling? Now, if you're cursing at a parent, red flag, right? Because now you're in the space of a temporary order could be issued against you. And it sounds bizarre, right? Because people do it all the time. They cuss each other out, right? But in the context of the public policy of these domestic violence statutes, the temporary orders are just to prevent the escalation of violence, to give people a stopping point so that it doesn't end up in someone being violently hurt or worse yet, a child getting hurt in conflicts. So we're seeing people who are like, normally peaceful and functioning, catching a case. And that is a real public policy problem, and we're dealing with it. Like our phones are ringing, the courts are flooded, people are starting to get back into court and doing their filings. And Mark, one of the first things I screen for is, what are the types of allegations? Because if you're in the land of these people are under extraordinary stress, they just need to break up, have a cooling off period, and then reestablish civil, respectful boundaries, then maybe what we should just do is have a temporary order in place, but continue to go into court to modify and increase visitation and physical custody until we achieve parity, right?
Yeah.
Like it was before we started dealing with COVID and job loss and all these factors. So a lot of times it's just about really advocating for your client, like telling the court that, the relationship with the child is so solid. We should just keep these two apart, but not penalize the parent, or worse yet, punish the child and have them suffer the loss of the relationship. But it's very dangerous times, and people have got to be extremely careful what they're saying, what they're posting, what they're doing, and how they're treating the other parent to their child, because you can catch a case right now, as I don't want to say by looking at the other person the wrong way, because that would be overstating the case, but for things that you just would otherwise not be doing, were you not under so much social, emotional, psychological, and economic stress. So these are things we have to consider as advocates.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I had a few weeks ago Dr. Robert Simon, who is one of the foremost, we'll call it foremost experts and expert witnesses in the space, and he talked about that. He testifies a lot that of these domestic incidents, and I'll touch on that because I have my opinion on those as well. But he takes a look at it, and he looks at it and he'll tell a judge, okay, based on this may fit the definition of domestic violence. I call it, like, you have the mean text domestic violence restraining orders. Reality. I've had guys come to me and it's literally based on, some of them aren't even mean text, but they shouldn't have been sending the texts.
Sure.
And
I see a lot of that.
Yeah. And he explained it. He's like, I want to explain to the judge of, okay, this was domestic violence in definition, but the only reason it happened was because this relationship was deteriorating, and there's zero risk of domestic violence moving forward. And the public in general doesn't understand what a domestic violence restraining order is, and it can create this stigma around this person that has very, very detrimental impact on their personal and professional lives. So I think that's one thing that I took from a couple of weeks ago from the interview. It's in terms of educating the judge, telling them, hey, I mean, this was something, this couple obviously doesn't get along. There's a reason why after 10 years of marriage, they're getting a divorce. There's a reason after 3 years of dating and 2 kids, they're separating and we're in this spot for child custody. There's no risk moving forward, but there needs to be that cooling off period.
Right. And so ideally you want, if you did something that, technically trips you up with the court, you might consider doing exactly what you said. So distilled, you take responsibility, you change the narrative, you create a path forward. But it's an extremely useful technique, right, to work with the other side to extend the stay away orders, meaning we're not going to talk, but change the custody visitation orders to create a path forward. Because so long as that temporary order expires, you don't have the severe repercussions that really work against both parties. So a lot of times a mom will have a restraining order, right? And it goes into a permanent restraining order, and they didn't realize that person could lose their job because that other father is a civil servant, right? And now can't pass a DOJ background check. Or that other person is a teacher or a firefighter or a policeman, right? And it cuts directly in an opposite direction against the need for support. Because if that other person loses their economic viability, gets terminated, worse yet, can't find a job, can't re-enter into their market, guess what that means for child support?
Yep. Not going to be as much money to go around for either party.
There you go. And that's one of those things that could really threaten the well-being of a child. So be careful the swords you throw. And if one is thrown at you, you have some shields. And those are proposals, even if the other side didn't agree, where if you have someone great like Mark who's showing up in the court fighting for you tooth and nail, they're going to tell the court, look, we're going to extend out the stay away order, give them a cooling off period. But what we're not going to do is cut off the father from the child, because this child is going to be destroyed from that. And just because they're fighting doesn't mean the child shouldn't have a chance to be a healthy, whole, productive human being. And we know statistically that the outcomes of children who don't have two involved parents, it's something worth looking at and considering from both sides, from the perspective of both mothers and fathers. Because what are you really after? Did you win the battle and then lose the war? Because one of the fact patterns that I think is really interesting is when mothers get early victories while the child is really young and saddled on the mother's chest, and very codependent on the physical needs and affection of the mother because they were just born, right? But then long term, right, they're wondering why this child is now a teenager and acting out, can't get control of the child. And they're wondering why they're calling this father that they successfully isolated from the child's life, right? And they're not getting much involvement. I see a fact pattern where it starts to dawn on the parent, what's happening to my child? Why are they dysfunctioning? And I submit, well, maybe not having a father psychically, emotionally, maybe when you see kids having mental health crises, acting up, fighting in school, abusing drugs and alcohol and sex, dropping out, you know, maybe there's a connection there, you think?
I think we got about 20 years of social science now that says that's unequivocally a fact.
Boom.
So we'll stay on. I have a question pop up. Usually we wait until the end, but this one's tied into the DV and what we're talking about. And this is something that I'll stand on the mountaintops. Guys vastly underreport domestic violence. A lot of studies show domestic violence is perpetuated by men and women at relatively equal rates. So, what are my rights? So we'll go in if a dad comes into our office and says this. So my wife's emotionally abusing me in front of minor children, stating your dad needs to die.
Let's
go ahead. Go ahead. I'll let you hop in on that.
Okay, so let's rephrase the statement that now through the eyes of the child, right? My mom is telling my dad that half of me needs to die. It must be my fault that she hates him. It must be me. She's so tired of taking care of me. She really wants me to die. She really wishes I wasn't here. Because I am the byproduct of these two and their relationship. So here I am. I should die. I should just go away. They would be happier if they didn't see me anymore. And this is why early adolescence is a key point to focus on as a risk factor for high conflict parents, because you do see incidents of self-harm. You see suicidal ideation. And no matter how bad you vilify and feel about the other parent, you're actually sentencing your child to what? To what? To the same death that you're wishing on the father? And that's one of these insights you gain from practicing so long and seeing these fact patterns. It's like, it's beyond abuse to the dad. This is child abuse. This is child abuse. And, I've seen a lot here, but I just want to be very focused on that dad. As bad as it feels to be told that, you've got to laser focus on how that's affecting the child. Because if you could see the outcome 5, 7, 10 years later, if that conduct becomes just repetitive and you stay in that environment, the outcomes are really compelling. And Mark touched on it. It's just kids are suffering, and they're resorting to all kinds of things because when they have these experiences, it's traumatic. Yeah. It's traumatic. Yeah.
I'm going to touch on something for our viewers. So a couple people have said, why is the flag next to my name? Different ways you interact with TFRM's page can earn you different badges. So I'm not flagging you saying you can't comment. You're earning those by your interactions, sharing posts, liking posts, commenting on posts, being involved in conversations. So flag, not a bad thing. I don't know what the badge is for that or what you've done to earn that, but that just means you interact with the page. So I had 5 or 6 people in the comments asking that question, so thought I'd address it. So we've spent quite a bit talking about on the domestic violence piece, and another topic that we probably don't talk about enough. And Shem, I think it was earlier, kind of touched on all the documentation that he had done, and it wasn't effective. So only about 1 in every 10 family law cases statistically ever make it to a final trial. I think that's probably wildly overstated to begin with. So if you're in a case, we both have plenty of cases where we know, hey, eventually this one's going to end in a trial. It may be a year from now, it may be 2 years from now, but we're going to be in court on a trial. What can a dad do? What are the most effective things a dad can do to help his attorney? Because I always tell dads, I could work on your case 40 hours a week for the next 8 weeks, and you would still know 20 times the information about your case. So you're in a case, you've probably been involved in it for, let's say, a year, or maybe it's one of them, they come to you and say, hey, I got a trial setting conference next week, I need representation. What can a dad do right now to help prepare his attorney to be most effective at trial?
So I think that's a really great question because it goes to the attorney-client relationship, right? And you have to understand that, you don't ask an accountant to do your taxes by sending them a shoebox of receipts. That's a highly ineffective way, right? You don't send 30 emails, right, with different little pieces of evidence, right? I think one thing you can do to successfully work with your attorney to prepare for trial is dedicate one afternoon in the conference room, hopefully in person, right? Spread out all the pieces of the puzzle that you think are important and let your attorney take the top 3 pieces of evidence for each claim you have. Child support, whether it's defense or you're owed it. Custody, separate that. Legal custody, top 3 pieces of evidence. Because what you find after doing this so long is that, a lot of things that the client thinks are relevant, like every little data point, every little possible piece of information, don't turn out to be relevant to the legal issues before the court. So just take one afternoon, okay, or a couple of hours with your attorney. Take all these pieces and just say, what are the top 3 key pieces of evidence that you think are relevant to prove up my right to have joint legal and physical custody or sole legal and physical custody, because that happens too, right? What are the game changers here, right? So what do I need to prove up my claim, to establish my bond, to establish my rights here? And then looking at it from the perspective of trial, there's also just a very limited number of pieces of evidence that you're going to need to poke holes in the story of the other side. So we call it rebuttal evidence, but really what you're trying to do is attack the credibility of the other side. They're lying because Exhibit A, right? Took him to the doctor, took him to school, sign-in sheet, right? They're lying because here's the check I wrote, right? For Pampers, milk, right? Here's my police report when I went to the police station to pick up my kid and she didn't show up. There's very limited pieces of evidence that actually become relevant. So I would become laser focused if I were a client and try to understand the trial through the mind of an attorney talking to a judge. So that goes with acknowledging that not everything I think is important is true. We are constrained through time. Hearings, you get about 15 minutes. That's both sides combined. That's how much the court allocates to your case on a regularly noticed hearing. You can get into longer procedures. But at trial, you're still confined by a slot. And so usually you're talking about 3 to 4 hours for both sides to present their cases. Most people can't afford more than that because trial is so expensive. So I would, if I were the client, identify the 3 key pieces of evidence through the guidance of my attorney that help me prove up each and every claim to child support, legal custody, physical custody, and visitation. I would just laser focus on. That means you've got 12 pieces of evidence that you're really going to put forward on your case in chief. And I'd start there.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point for me, especially when you bring an attorney in the middle of a case. Maybe you change, maybe you've been self-represented, and you just drop 5,000 documents on my desk. Number one is it would take me 15 hours to dig through them, and that's not even determining. That's not even figuring out what actually is useful. So,
right.
I mean, Allison in the comments here, you need to do your own homework. You 100% do. I view if you hire me to represent you, we are a team, and I can't do it without you. And so you may give me a piece of evidence, and I'm sure, Tamara, you have this too. Hey, this is the piece. This is what's going to win. And I look at the client, and I'm like, we're not even going to use it.
Right.
And they're so confused because the best thing you can do is give your attorney the information. And then it's our job to drive the strategy.
Yeah.
That's where a good attorney-client relationship is.
Yeah. So key points, Mark, how about use a Dropbox link and organize your own information into files? How about that? How about take those 1,000 emails and say 1 Dropbox links, right? With 5 files, each representing my claim: child support, legal custody, physical custody, visitation, right? Property rights, whatever the issues are. And then here are my top 3 pieces of evidence that I want to work with you in identifying. And even if you have 25, it makes it so much easier for the attorney to look at that information and go, oh, that's it. I'll pick this one. This is really helpful because we don't have infinite number. Nobody has infinite resources. Clients don't have, limits to their budget. Courts don't have unlimited times for your hearings and trials, and attorneys don't have unlimited resources to go on an excavation to find one document. So help them by just getting a little bit more sophisticated by using Gmail, a Dropbox link or a G Drive, and organize your information intelligently. So that involves you getting proactive in the education process. And then if you can't get the attorney on the phone, call the assistant, say, hey assistant, Mark's going to work on my visitation hearing. Can I send you a Dropbox links, or do you use Dropbox? Do you use Gmail, G Drive? What do you use? How can I best get this information to you? And that's another way, without using attorney time, where you can coordinate your efforts with the staff.
Yeah. And I will say this too, on the trial piece, judges are human too. We went to law school with judges. We were in classes with them. Yeah. They go to the same restaurants and walk the same streets. If an attorney walks in and says, I'm going to use 500 exhibits, the judge is going to be tuned out by the time you get through 10 of them.
Right, because you're blowing their calendar. The perspective of a judge is, I've got to move this case to disposition. On a domestic violence restraining order, I need to make a decision on this case. Okay. On a parentage case, I need a judgment on whether or not this person is the father, the parent. Okay. So you've got to get to the point where you realize a decision has to be made. It has to be fast. And you're so right, Mark, and so insightful to focus on the judge, because knowing your judge, doing research on who your judge is, going into court, these are things you can do for yourself right now. Go into court, observe all the COVID protocols, and sit through a whole day and just listen to what the judge is saying to the attorneys, is saying to the people unrepresented coming in through the courts. And I think that's the key piece of education for the client, because they're going to see that judges make decisions the same way we do. we're intuitive. Yes, there's a lot of law downloaded. We're very intuitive. We're observing your body language. We want to know that you're telling the truth. And really, we just want to know that if we give you custody and visitation with this child, they're going to be strapped in a seatbelt. You're not going to be drinking, get into a car crash. You're going to get them to school. It'd be great if you did some homework, right? But it's like at the end of the day, we just want to make sure everybody's safe. Okay. And they want to make a decision that doesn't backfire on them. So get to the point, make it quick, study your judge, and laser focus in on the child.
Yeah. That's a big thing, especially, and I guess we can kind of turn to this and we can talk about a little bit about mediation, because it's unique here in California. It's mandatory, and county by county is unique. But everything you do in court, whether it be mediation, whether it be at trial, whether it be in these 15-minute hearings, the judge needs to feel as if essentially the start of every sentence that's said by you or your representative is, I believe it's in the best interest of the child that. Because the minute, and judges are good at this, the minute they sense that it is personal, and I'm not, this is my comment, this is never a guest comment, men are treated differently in family court than women are, in my opinion. My comment, no one else's. But the minute they feel like it is about child support, it is about being vindictive, they're gonna note that. I know that a lot of people have beef with judges, and they're generally pretty good about catching that type of stuff. I'll get a lot of clients who the first thing they say is, "Hey, yeah, I want to get more custody to lower child support." All right, well, you called the wrong law office to do that. And most likely you're going to go in there and the judge is going to sniff that from a mile away, that it's all about finances.
Absolutely. I think, what's so impressive is, when you have a judge who's been on the bench, who, has no problem making a decision, they so appreciate when you come in and you get straight to the point. And the judges that are in California, they're extremely savvy, meaning the fact they're seeing. So we get hundreds of cases a year, right? Judges are seeing potentially thousands of people every year. So it's rapid fire, right? So they're very attuned to the relationship between custody and support. Those are the two factors in child support, timeshare. So, I mean, the arguments cut both ways. Nothing's set in stone. You can seek a modification, but what you don't want to do is somehow misplace your lack of understanding about the court process. And you're talking about, once a judge and two lawyers are in court, you've got a combined experience of education and talent and skill of about 300 years, right? And somehow, I think a lot of people, because they underestimate judges and even lawyers, that they walk away just blaming the judge. Well, that those are easy outs. Stop making excuses. Be proactive and ask, what can I do to change the narrative of the story that's being told on me in court? Because you can know absolutely nothing about the law, right? And say, I'm a good dad because, right? My child is so close to me, right? We're close. Here's the time we've spent. Here are the memories I have. Here's the pictures. Please don't rip me away from him. I've seen that be very effective in pro pers, even up against an attorney. Your Honor, I need my son. My son needs me. We're so close. I've done all I can to show you, if you give me custody back, the child's going to be safe. I'm committed. Here's my classes. I'm actively in therapy. I've taken my anger management courses, and I'm working on establishing civility with the other parent. Those things are so intuitive and compelling that you're really going to gain an ally in court, when you speak to a judge from the framework of the best interests of the child.
Yeah. Definitely. So I think we got time. We'll take 2 questions here. I gotta give a couple people shout outs that are being active in the comments. Alice, it looks like from the comments you're based in Michigan. John Nichols, so John, Brian, there's a handful. You guys are doing phenomenal work with the legislature up there. I think that in the next couple of years, you guys are going to be one of the states that's going to get 50 presumption of 50-50 custody. So thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. And I see your comment in here. Yeah, the father's rights movement's position is pro presumption of 50-50 custody. Just like in Arkansas and Kentucky they have. So that is a position of the father's rights movement. Let me dig through here. I know we had a couple really good questions.
Can I just say something, Mark?
Go for it.
So every state is different. Every county within the state is different. Every city within the state is different. Every attorney working in that city is different. But you know what's not? The child. Children all across America want the same things, right? And judges all across America want the same things for that child. And so while I personally don't have any ideological like I represent both men and women, okay? And people of all different persuasions who identify differently in terms of their gender, which makes it interesting in terms of the father-mother framework. You know, the point is that children, they need to be safe, they need to be provided for. You know, don't make excuses for paying support. You know, don't alienate the father, don't alienate the mother, work on your communication skills. That's something I see is true of all parents, both men and women. Most parents need therapy, even if it's just because, listen, it's hard to be a parent and there's no manual. You don't want your manual to be the family code necessarily because you're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Just learn to be a good parent. Join a parent group, right? When you take them to soccer, get a couple parents, hey, let's meet up for coffee and go from soccer to the park to Disneyland. Show the court that you're infusing this child in the kinds of experiences and people that create for happiness and a happy childhood and good memories and good social relationships, you know, good relationships with their teachers, you know. Be proactive about scheduling medical appointments. This is something that's true all across America, right? And something everybody can do to be a better parent. You see the child going wrong, think about it like, that's not normal. Maybe I need to go get a diagnostic here and tune into my child's mental health and stop demonizing the other parent, but really laser focus in on what's happening to my child here and why, and how can I, you know, create a better path for them forward, you know. And I think I respect and applaud you, Mark, for the work you're doing, because advocacy on broad-based levels and awareness about the importance of a father's right to be in a child's life, it's long overdue. It just had to happen. And at the same time, I want to say that, you know, being a parent is hard, you know, and it's important we be gracious about just, you know, this is an 18-year-long project in terms of the law, but it's actually a lifetime project. And I would hate for anybody to have to be in the experience of having to visit a child who unfortunately became injured or ill in a hospital and make that the first time they try to have a conversation with the other parent. Don't wait that long, you know. Try to go easy on yourself, you know, be gracious about how you treat discourtesies and other things that are happening in your life, and just understand it's hard on everybody right now. So let's take a zoomed out perspective, like you said, Mark. Just, you know, think big picture. You know, we want our kids to be healthy, we want them to be safe, we want them to be productive, you know. And I don't want to have to, for the first time, figure out how to be a co-parent, right, in the worst of situations, right, when a child is sick. And if you think of it that way, then you might have a different value for the father in the life, a different value for a mother in the life, a grandparent, and all the relationships that contribute to healthy children in America.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That's one of the big things I tell. I mean, the one of the things you can control as you go through this process is being the best parent you can be.
Yeah.
And I always go through, guys. I mean, psychologically, we know that in our brains, when there's a blank spot where we don't know exactly what's going on or what's happening, we assume the worst case scenario. There are situations out there, but for the most part, I can guarantee you, your co-parent doesn't want your child harmed. They want they want your child to graduate from high school. They want them to graduate from college. They want them to have successful relationships. But a lot of times, what I see parents do is they throw these negative assumptions at the other parent, and it just breaks down communication. So, being the best parent you can be is the only thing you can control, and give your co-parent the benefit of the doubt. I couldn't agree with that more. That's a piece of advice I give to every single client. So we got one more question here. I think this is an interesting one and a good one to cover because California is a bit unique on this one given our laws. But I want to touch on Jose here. My ex called CPS on me for socially drinking around my kids. Now I'm losing my case when she got arrested for assault. So I want to roll it back to the first half of it because I think this brings up an interesting case. We have weed being legal here in California. It's still federally illegal or federally regulated. But what's your advice for dads? This is a question I get a lot around socially drinking, or here in the state of California, social usage of marijuana.
My advice would be to consider the risks and detriment that could potentially be happening to your case if what you think is social drinking or the social use of marijuana becomes characterized as addiction, right? One of the unique issues that I see, and it's actually on my plate right now, is that when a parent is addicted, they don't actually know. I've got a guy driving down the wrong side of the street in Las Vegas. All right. Do you think he thinks of himself as an alcoholic? Right? No. Because, to say I'm a social drinker is a way of separating out your good character and your good identity from some habits that may tend to jeopardize your child's safety. So one thing you can do is not drink in the 20 or use drugs, even if they're legal in your state, in the 24 hours prior to your visitation time. What does that do? It keeps everybody safe, including yourself, right? Because a lot of people are getting into car accidents because they're driving while they're high, right? So don't make excuses. Be honest with yourself about what you're doing and just try to create healthy parameters. Now, the fact pattern you gave, sir, is interesting to me because you said, and now I'm losing my case. Well, guess what? When DCFS is involved, there's a high likelihood that everything you say against the other parent, right, is being characterized against you. So mom says you're a social drinker in front of the child. Well, DCF is saying, well, how does mom know that? Was she there while you were drinking? Did she see you drinking? Did she allow this? Well, guess what? Permitting, right, you to abuse drugs and alcohol in front of the child is also an abuse from the mom's perspective. So we're going to take the child away from both of you. Right now, mom's getting arrested for assault. I mean, it's madness. And so people get surprised when they are, pointing the finger at the other side, without representation, thinking they're going to get their child through the CPS process. But guess what? Child gets taken from both of their homes, right, and placed in foster. And that's an interesting possibility as a result of making exaggerated claims and also permitting a parent to do something that you thought at one point was okay, but then you matured and looked back and said, oh no, this is now a problem, right? So
Yeah.
be careful.
And Cricket here, this is not what we're saying. What
No,
we're
no,
saying
no,
is
no.
we're looking at it from a strategic
Yeah.
perspective in
Yeah.
terms of there's nothing wrong with I have a similar situation I'm currently dealing with, and it is that he was an addict in the past. He's been clean for a substantial period of time now, and we said, hey, you know what? We'll put in the order that we'll do a drug test today or the next 24 hours, and no drinking or mind altering substances for 12 hours prior to parenting time and during parenting time. And the other side tried to use it. Oh, look, they're prepping for him to be able to use when he doesn't have her and all these other things. But the judge looked at it and it's like, that's a pretty standard order.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually, I'll be on any time there's any sort of allegation. It could be a DUI 12 years ago that's technically not supposed to be considered, and the judge will be like, shrug their shoulders and say, okay, no drinking or drugs 12 hours before or during parenting time.
Right.
So it's not at all calling dads alcoholics or anything, but if there are those allegations, and maybe, I mean, hey, there are A+ human beings that have a DUI on their record, that have a possession charge on their record. Just know you have, even if you don't have those, you have to be aware. Things that happened while you were together, while you were married, prior to you breaking up, may not be okay now. And it's something that I tell clients, in the short term, you may have to give it up for the long-term benefit of having a more prominent part in your child's life. Because all it takes, seen it happen, mom makes allegations that are unsubstantiated, dad gets a DUI, all of a sudden, all of mom's accusations are true because dad went out and got a DUI.
Yeah, I think it's just so important to be aware of how you're being perceived, and the worst possible narrative about one or two social drinks that happen 2 or 3 times a week is, oh, he's an alcoholic. So absolutely not. I am not a decision maker of morality. That neither is a judge, but I do think that some of the things that could put children at risk, if communicated properly to the court, would result in someone having to agree to drug testing, agree to alcohol testing, just to clear their name, right? If it's not true, then here's a way to make sure everybody's safe. So I've seen those orders as well, Mark. And just be careful about how your actions are being perceived. If you're drinking and smoking alcohol, I've had cases where I just pull the social media, and you see bottles and bottles of liquor and weed joints and maybe federally designated illegal drugs, which would be a problem for your case. So just be aware, and mindful about when you're in a case, and you're trying to establish your rights with the child. It's time to just, have that self check-in, and, how can I create a circumstance where my child is safe, and what do I need to change within me to be the best parent I could be? And if you focus on that, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, very, very well put. Well, we're a little bit over an hour now, Tamara. So I want to wrap things up. Once again, where can they find you on the internet and then also on social media?
Yes. So at social media, you can find me on Instagram at Tamara Benefield ESQ. That's TamaraBenefieldESQ. You can also see me on my website online at www.beverlyhillsfamilylawattorney.com. My name is Tamara Benefield Falk, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be here with our very own CEO and leader of the Father's Rights Movement, Mark Reel. And it's just a pleasure to hear the comments and see the interaction with the audience. And I look forward to engaging with you all in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For all of our viewers, we will be back next week. I will be live from Lakeland, Florida. Are you going to be in Lakeland next week or no?
I'm trying, Mark. I'm
trying.
working
Okay.
on it.
I'm going to be live with, all right, it may not be live. It may be tape recorded next week, but we have Georgia attorney, Atlanta area attorney, Ed Hecht will be on the show next week, and we'll be doing that in Lakeland, Florida. So for everyone that's watching, thank you so much for the support, and we will see everyone next week.